The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floors of Metropolitan Trust Bank as a man in his mid-30s pushed through the heavy glass doors. He was wearing well-worn jeans and a plain black t-shirt. Comfortable clothes he'd chosen while spending the morning overlooking construction at his newest tech facility. The bank's interior was impressive, with its soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers creating an atmosphere of old money and tradition. Several customers in crisp business suits were already seated in the premium services area, being attended to by bankers in perfectly pressed suits. The contrast between their formal attire and his casual clothing couldn't have been more striking, but it didn't bother him one bit. As a tech entrepreneur who'd built his company from a small garage startup to a $50 million enterprise, he'd learned long ago that suits don't make the person. His company's success had come from his brilliant mind and relentless work ethic, not his wardrobe choices. Today, he was here to establish a new banking relationship after moving his company's headquarters to this city. He glanced around, taking in the ornate decor and the hushed conversations happening at various desks. The premium services area caught his eye. It was separated from the main floor by elegant rope barriers and furnished with plush leather chairs. A sign above read Wealth Management and Premium Banking Services. Walking confidently toward the premium section, he could feel several pairs of eyes following him. The security guard's gaze lingered a bit too long, and a few customers looked up from their phones with questioning expressions. He'd grown used to these looks over the years. They no longer bothered him the way they once had. His previous bank had handled over $50 million in transactions for his tech company last year alone. Now, with 3 new contracts lined up and a major expansion in progress, he needed a bank with strong international banking capabilities. Metropolitan Trust had come highly recommended by several business associates. He'd done his homework too. The bank's wealth management division had won several awards for their personalized service and innovative investment strategies. Their international wire transfer fees were competitive, and their online banking platform was exactly what his growing company needed. As he approached the premium services desk, he pulled out his phone, ready to show his company's portfolio and banking history. The leather folder tucked under his arm contained all the documentation needed to open new accounts: business licenses, tax returns, company incorporation papers, and recent bank statements. Everything was organized and ready to go, just the way he liked to handle business. What he didn't know was that this ordinary Tuesday morning was about to become anything but ordinary. The next few minutes would spark a chain of events that would not only change his life, but would shake up the entire banking institution and force them to confront some uncomfortable truths about how they judged their customers. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and stepped forward to the premium services desk, completely unaware that his simple request for banking services was about to expose a deep-rooted problem that had been lurking beneath the bank's polished surface for far too long. The woman behind the desk looked up from her computer screen, her expression shifting ever so slightly as she took in his appearance. That subtle change in her face, one he'd seen countless times before, told him everything he needed to know about what was coming next. But this time, things weren't going to play out the way she expected. Little did anyone in that grand banking hall realize that this seemingly routine encounter was about to become a powerful lesson about prejudice, privilege, and the price of judging a book by its cover. The branch manager's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as she made her way toward the premium services desk. She'd been watching from her office, her disapproval growing with each passing second. Today had already been stressful. 2 employees had called in sick, and she was behind on her quarterly reports. The last thing she needed was someone disrupting her bank's prestigious atmosphere. "I can help you over here," she called out loudly, pointing toward the general service line where several people were waiting. Her voice carried across the banking hall, causing several customers to look up from their phones and tablets. The tech entrepreneur remained exactly where he stood, his calm demeanor unchanged. "Thank you, but I'm actually here for wealth management services," he replied politely, reaching for the leather folder under his arm. "I'd like to discuss your premium banking options for my company." The manager's perfectly penciled eyebrows arched higher. She gave him another once-over, taking in his casual attire with poorly concealed disdain. "Sir, this section is reserved for our established high-net-worth clients," she said, emphasizing the word established, as if explaining something to a child. Perhaps I can direct you to one of our personal bankers who can help with a basic checking account. A young bank employee working nearby looked up from his computer, his eyes widening with recognition as he watched the scene unfold. He'd just been reading about this very businessman in a financial magazine, but before he could speak up, the manager continued her dismissal. "We take pride in our premium services department," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness. "Our clients here typically handle substantial investments and complex banking needs." She gestured again toward the general service line. "I'm sure we can find a more suitable banking solution for you over there." The tech entrepreneur smiled slightly, remaining remarkably composed. He'd built his company dealing with far tougher situations than this. "I understand completely," he said, pulling out his phone. "Would you mind giving me your employee ID number? And I'd like the name of your regional director as well." The manager's confidence wavered for just a moment. Something in his tone made her pause, but she quickly recovered. "Sir, if you're planning to file a complaint, you're welcome to do so through our customer service department. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual premium clients to attend to." As she turned to walk away, the young bank employee who had recognized the businessman finally found his courage. He stood up from his desk, clutching a copy of the financial magazine he'd been reading earlier. His hands were shaking slightly, but he knew he couldn't stay silent. The tech entrepreneur noticed the young employee's movement and the magazine in his hands. Their eyes met briefly, and a look of understanding passed between them. This moment was bigger than just one rejected bank transaction. It was about challenging the deeply rooted prejudices that still existed behind the polished facades of corporate America. Other customers in the premium section had stopped their transactions to watch the scene unfold. The silence in the banking hall grew thick with tension. The manager, still standing halfway between her office and the premium desk, seemed to sense that something wasn't quite right, but her pride wouldn't let her back down now. What she didn't realize was that her actions in the next few minutes would not only cost her bank millions in potential business, but would also trigger a series of events that would force the entire institution to confront its hidden biases. The quiet morning at Metropolitan Trust was about to become a powerful lesson in humility and human dignity. The tech entrepreneur quietly took out his phone and began recording. He'd handled prejudice with patience and dignity his entire career, but today would be different. Today would be the day someone finally learned that success doesn't wear a suit and respect isn't determined by appearances. The branch manager's dismissive attitude grew stronger as she noticed the tech entrepreneur wasn't leaving. She crossed her arms and raised her voice just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Look, I've explained our policy. This section is for clients who handle serious money. I suggest you try the local credit union down the street. They might be better suited for your level of banking." The young employee who had recognized the businessman couldn't stay quiet any longer. Clutching the financial magazine, he stepped forward. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake. This gentleman is—" "Return to your desk immediately," she snapped, cutting him off. "I'll handle this situation." The tech entrepreneur remained calm, though his eyes revealed a mix of disappointment and determination. He opened his leather folder and pulled out several documents. "I'm trying to establish a new banking relationship for my technology company," he explained patiently. "We're looking to transfer roughly $50 million in assets, with an expected growth to $100 million by year's end." The manager's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Sir, please. Do you really expect me to believe that? In those clothes?" Several customers in the premium section shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A woman in a business suit actually closed her laptop and started gathering her things, shaking her head in disapproval, not at the entrepreneur, but at the manager's behavior. "I'd like to speak with your regional director," the entrepreneur said firmly. "I believe your treatment of potential clients deserves some review." "Are you threatening me?" the manager demanded, her face flushing red. "Security," she called out, despite the entrepreneur having done nothing threatening. The security guard approached reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The entrepreneur calmly turned to him and smiled. "No need for that, sir. I'm actually just about done here." He pulled out his phone and stopped the recording he'd been making. "I think I have everything I need." Just then, the young employee stepped forward again, this time holding out the magazine. On its cover was a familiar face, the very man standing in the bank, featured in an article about America's most successful young tech entrepreneurs. The headline read, "Rising Tech Giant Expanding to East Coast, $50 million Deal Confirmed." The color drained from the manager's face as she looked from the magazine to the man standing before her. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "My company's been featured in several business magazines recently," the entrepreneur said quietly. "But that shouldn't matter. No one should be judged by their appearance when they walk into a bank or anywhere else." The woman in the business suit who had been packing up her things stood and approached the manager. "I'd like to close my accounts," she announced. "I've banked here for 15 years, but I can't support an institution that treats people this way." Other customers began murmuring their agreement. The young employee stepped closer to the entrepreneur, offering his business card. "Sir, when you speak with the regional director, please let them know I witnessed everything. What happened here today was wrong." The manager's professional demeanor crumbled completely. I didn't realize we could still." "No need," the entrepreneur interrupted politely. "Your regional director will be receiving an email with a recording of our interaction, along with documentation of my company's assets and the business we were prepared to bring to this bank. I hope this becomes a learning opportunity for everyone involved." As he turned to leave, he paused and looked back at the young employee who had tried to help. "Thank you for having the courage to speak up. That means more than you know." The banking hall had fallen completely silent. The manager stood frozen, watching as potentially millions in business walked out the door. But more than just losing a valuable client, she had revealed something ugly about herself and the biases lurking beneath the bank's polished surface. The entrepreneur's quiet dignity in the face of discrimination had turned an ordinary banking errand into a powerful moment of truth, one that would soon ripple through the entire organization and force some much-needed changes in how they treated all their customers. The bank's regional headquarters was buzzing with activity by that afternoon. The tech entrepreneur's email, containing the video recording and his company's financial documents, had landed in several important inboxes. The regional director had already called 3 emergency meetings, and the bank's PR team was working overtime. In his downtown office, the entrepreneur sat at his desk, looking out over the city skyline. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since he'd left the bank. News of the incident had spread quickly through local business circles, with several other successful entrepreneurs sharing similar experiences they'd faced at various banks. A gentle knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. His assistant entered with a concerned look. "The regional director of Metropolitan Trust is on line 1. This is their 4th call. They're also requesting an in-person meeting." The entrepreneur nodded thoughtfully. "Tell them I'll meet with them tomorrow morning. And please ask our legal team to join us." He wasn't interested in filing lawsuits, but he wanted the bank to understand the seriousness of what had happened. Meanwhile, back at the bank branch, the young employee who had tried to help was being interviewed by the HR department. "It wasn't just today," he explained, his voice steady despite his nervousness. "I've seen similar incidents before, but everyone was too afraid to speak up." The interviewer leaned forward, taking detailed notes. "How long has this been going on?" "Since I started here last year," the young employee replied. "I've watched at least 5 potential clients get turned away because of how they looked. One was wearing work clothes because he'd come straight from his construction company. Turns out he owned 3 successful businesses in the area." Across town, the branch manager sat in her home, staring at her phone. Her social media was flooded with notifications as the story spread. Local business groups were sharing the incident, and several of her premium clients had already requested to transfer their accounts to other branches. She thought about all the times she'd made snap judgments about people based on their appearance. Each decision had seemed justified at the time, but now those memories felt heavy with shame. The entrepreneur's quiet dignity in the face of her discrimination made her behavior seem even more appalling. Back at the tech company, the entrepreneur reviewed emails from other banking institutions practically begging for his business. But this wasn't about finding a new bank anymore, it was about creating lasting change. He opened his laptop and began typing a proposal. If Metropolitan Trust wanted to make things right, he had some ideas that went beyond just accepting his business. His plan included funding for entrepreneur mentorship programs in underserved communities, unconscious bias training for all bank employees, and a complete overhaul of their customer service policies. The young bank employee's phone buzzed with a message. It was from the regional director's office, requesting his presence at tomorrow's meeting with the tech entrepreneur. His hands shook slightly as he read the message, but he felt proud. Standing up for what was right might have been scary, but staying silent would have been worse. As the day drew to a close, the incident had become more than just a viral story. It was turning into a catalyst for change. Other banks in the area began reviewing their own policies, worried they might be next to face such scrutiny. Local business groups started planning workshops about discrimination in financial services. The entrepreneur's assistant popped her head in one last time before leaving for the day. "The story's hitting the national business news tomorrow," she informed him. "They're calling it a wake-up call for the banking industry." He nodded, still focused on his proposal. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't about revenge or public shaming. It was about turning an ugly incident into an opportunity for real change. Sometimes the biggest transformations start with the smallest moments of injustice, when someone finally decides to stand up and say, "This isn't right." The next morning arrived with gray clouds hanging over the city. The regional director's office was unusually busy for 8 a.m., with staff hurrying to prepare for the most important meeting of their careers. The conference room table held fresh notepads, water pitchers, and an obvious tension in the air. The tech entrepreneur arrived exactly on time, dressed in the same casual style that had caused such a stir the day before. This time, though, his simple black t-shirt and jeans were met with nervous smiles instead of judgmental stares. His legal team followed, carrying folders of documents, while the young bank employee who had spoken up waited anxiously by the door. "Thank you for coming," the regional director began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who hadn't slept much. "We've reviewed the video recording, and I want to personally apologize for how you were treated in our branch." The entrepreneur nodded but remained silent, allowing the moment to settle. The branch manager sat at the far end of the table, looking smaller than she had the day before. Her usual confidence was replaced by genuine remorse. "Before we discuss anything else," the entrepreneur finally spoke, "I'd like to hear from your team about how you plan to prevent this from happening to anyone else." He gestured toward the young employee. "I understand this wasn't an isolated incident." The employee straightened in his chair and shared what he'd witnessed over the past year. The pattern of judgments, the dismissed customers, the quiet discrimination that had become almost routine. His voice grew stronger as he spoke, encouraged by supportive nods from the entrepreneur. The regional director wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. "We've already begun reviewing all customer complaints from the past 3 years. The numbers," he paused, looking troubled, "the numbers suggest we have a serious problem." "That's why I'm here," the entrepreneur replied, pulling out his laptop. "I have a proposal that goes beyond just accepting my company's business." He opened a presentation that made several banking executives lean forward with interest. The proposal outlined a comprehensive plan: funding for minority business programs, mandatory training for all staff, revised service policies, and a community advisory board to provide ongoing feedback. The entrepreneur had even included metrics for measuring success. "This isn't about punishment," he explained, looking directly at the branch manager. "It's about growth. About making sure the next person who walks through your doors wearing work clothes or casual attire gets the same respect as someone in an expensive suit." The young employee spoke up again, his voice steady. "Many of our best clients are entrepreneurs who made their fortune by working hard, not by dressing up. We need to change how we see success." The branch manager finally found her voice. "I've been thinking about all the people I might have turned away," she admitted, her eyes watery. "How many dreams I might have dismissed because I was too quick to judge. I want to be part of making this right." The regional director looked at the proposal numbers again. The cost of implementing these changes would be significant, but the cost of not changing would be even higher. "We'll need board approval for some of this," he said, "but you have my complete support." As the meeting continued, the entrepreneur's phone buzzed with messages from other business owners sharing similar stories. What had started as one person's stand against discrimination was growing into something bigger: a movement for change in the banking industry. The young employee caught the entrepreneur's eye and mouthed a quiet thank you. His small act of courage the day before had helped set all of this in motion. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of bravery. By meeting's end, handshakes were exchanged and documents were signed. The branch manager approached the entrepreneur last, her voice sincere. "I'll never make assumptions about someone's worth based on their appearance again," she said. "Thank you for turning my mistake into a learning opportunity for all of us." Outside, the gray clouds had begun to clear. The entrepreneur looked up at the bank building, thinking about all the people who would walk through those doors in the future. Thanks to one uncomfortable moment and the courage to address it, they would all be treated with the dignity they deserved. 2 weeks after the meeting, Metropolitan Trust was a different place. The marble floors and crystal chandeliers remained the same, but something fundamental had shifted in how the bank operated. The branch lobby now displayed a new sign. "Success has many faces. All are welcome here." The branch manager sat in her office, reviewing applications for the bank's new small business mentorship program. Her desk, once pristinely organized, was covered with proposals from entrepreneurs of all backgrounds. Each morning, she made a point of walking through the lobby, greeting every customer with the same warm smile, regardless of their attire. "You'll want to see this," the young employee said, walking into her office with the morning's business news. The headline read, "Major banks follow Metropolitan Trust's lead, industry-wide changes in customer service policies." The article detailed how their story had sparked a nationwide conversation about banking practices. Other financial institutions were scrambling to implement similar changes, worried about becoming the next viral example of discriminatory behavior. In the premium services area, a contractor in dusty work boots was discussing investment options for his growing construction company. Next to him, a young woman in casual clothes was opening accounts for her successful online business. The roped-off sections that once divided customers had been removed entirely. The tech entrepreneur's company had indeed brought their accounts to Metropolitan Trust, but with a condition: they would regularly send mystery shoppers of various backgrounds to ensure the new policies were being followed. Today, one such visitor was about to arrive. A woman walked in wearing paint-splattered overalls, her hair tied back messily. She headed straight for the premium services desk, carrying a folder of documents about her thriving art gallery chain. The young employee greeted her warmly, offering her a seat and his full attention. The branch manager watched from her office, smiling as she remembered how differently this scene would have played out just weeks ago. The training sessions had opened many eyes, including her own. She'd learned that real success often came in unexpected packages, and the most valuable clients weren't always the ones in expensive suits. In the break room, employees were reviewing the bank's new customer service guidelines. "Remember when we used to judge people by their clothes?" one teller asked, shaking her head. "Now we're judging our own past behavior instead." The regional director had stopped by for a surprise visit, pleased to find the changes weren't just superficial. He overheard conversations about business plans rather than fashion choices. The focus had shifted to what customers needed rather than how they looked. The young employee who had spoken up that fateful day had been promoted to customer service trainer. He now traveled to other branches, sharing the story and teaching others how to recognize and overcome their biases. His small act of courage had turned into a career path he never expected. Outside the bank, a line of food trucks had set up shop, part of the bank's new community engagement program. The tech entrepreneur had suggested making banking more accessible and less intimidating. Today, people could discuss business loans over lunch from local vendors. The branch manager stepped out to grab lunch, chatting with a food truck owner about expanding his business. 6 months ago, she might have dismissed him. Now, she was helping him plan his franchise strategy. The change in her wasn't just professional, it was personal. Back inside, the mystery shopper in paint-splattered overalls was finishing her transaction. She would later report that she'd received excellent service, but more importantly, she'd felt genuinely welcomed. The report would join dozens of others, documenting the bank's transformation. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, the branch manager looked around at her changed workplace. The elegance remained, but the pretense was gone. Success still walked through their doors every day, It just came wearing many different outfits. 1 month had passed since the changes at Metropolitan Trust began, and the impact was spreading far beyond the bank's walls. The local business community had transformed, with the bank becoming a hub for entrepreneurs from all walks of life. Early morning at the bank looked different now. The lobby hosted a weekly business builders breakfast where new and experienced business owners could network. Today, a plumber who'd built a successful chain of service companies was sharing advice with a group of startup founders. The branch manager stood at the back of the room, listening to the conversation. Her own story had become a powerful teaching moment in the bank's training programs. "I was the perfect example of how not to judge a book by its cover," she often said during these sessions. "Now I'm proud to say we've thrown away the cover completely." A group of high school students filed into the bank's community room for a financial literacy workshop. The tech entrepreneur had insisted that education be a key part of the bank's new mission. "We're not just fixing the past," he'd said. "We're building a better future." The young employee, now a full-time trainer, was leading today's session. "Success doesn't wear a uniform," he told the students. "It wears work boots, paint-stained jeans, and sometimes even comes straight from the gym. What matters is what you're building, not what you're wearing." At the premium services desk, a woman in medical scrubs was opening a business account for her growing healthcare staffing company. She'd rushed in between hospital shifts, and under the old system, she might have been directed to the general line. Now she was getting the premium service her multi-million-dollar business deserved. The regional director had stopped by again, this time with news that made everyone smile. The bank's new policies had led to a 40% increase in new business accounts. More importantly, customer satisfaction scores had hit an all-time high. The phrase, "I feel welcomed here," appeared in nearly every review. Outside, a film crew was setting up equipment. The bank's transformation had caught the attention of a documentary maker who wanted to tell the story of how one moment of discrimination had sparked industry-wide change. The branch manager watched them work, remembering how differently things could have turned out. "We're interviewing the tech entrepreneur later today," the filmmaker told her. "His story has inspired similar changes at banks across the country. But we want to tell your story too, how someone can learn and grow from their mistakes." In the break room, employees shared stories about their favorite new customers. There was the mechanic who'd built a fleet of mobile repair shops, the baker whose food truck empire had grown into a restaurant chain, and the house painter who'd become one of their biggest commercial real estate investors. The young employee checked his email between training sessions. Other banks had been reaching out, asking him to share his experience and help implement similar changes in their branches. His moment of standing up for what was right had turned into a movement. The tech entrepreneur's office had become a meeting point for business leaders who wanted to support the changes. They'd formed a committee to review banking practices across the city, ensuring that no entrepreneur would face discrimination when trying to grow their business. Back at the bank, the branch manager was reviewing the day's appointments. A construction worker would be coming in to discuss financing for his third development project. A landscaper needed to set up international wire transfers for his expanding business. Each appointment represented someone who might have been turned away just a month ago. As the afternoon sun filled the lobby, the bank felt more like a community center than a formal financial institution. The barriers that once divided people had been replaced by connections that brought them together. Success still walked through their doors every day. Now it just received the welcome it deserved, no matter what it was wearing. 6 months had passed since that life-changing day at Metropolitan Trust. The morning sun sparkled through the windows as a group of banking executives from across the country gathered in the main conference room. They weren't here to discuss profits or market share. They were here to learn how one branch had changed the face of banking. The branch manager stood at the podium, no longer the same person who had made that terrible judgment half a year ago. "Our biggest success isn't in our numbers," she told the crowd, "though those have grown beyond our expectations. Our real success is in the lives we've touched and the barriers we've broken down." In the lobby, a wall of photographs told countless success stories. A chef in a flower-covered apron who now owned 5 restaurants. A mechanic in oil-stained coveralls whose auto shop chain had gone national. A house painter whose real estate empire started with a single borrowed ladder. Each picture showed someone who might have been judged by their appearance before the change. The young employee, now the bank's head of diversity and inclusion training, led tours through the transformed branch. "See that desk?" he would say, pointing to the premium services area. "That's where it all started. Now it's where dreams begin, no matter what they're wearing." A group of business school students scribbled notes as they watched the bank in action. Their professor had brought them to see what he called the future of financial services. They watched as a landscaper in muddy boots discussed his company's international expansion with a senior investment advisor. The tech entrepreneur, whose simple act of standing up for himself had started it all, now sat on the bank's advisory board. Today, he was meeting with other board members to review applications for their business mentorship program. The stack of folders on the table represented hundreds of dreams waiting to be given a fair chance. In the community room, the branch manager was interviewing a potential new employee. "Tell me about a time you had to overcome prejudice," she asked. The standard interview questions had changed. They now focused on understanding and empathy rather than just banking experience. Outside, a news crew was setting up for a live broadcast. The bank's transformation had become a case study in corporate culture change. Other banks had started copying their programs, but Metropolitan Trust remained the leader in inclusive banking practices. The regional director walked through the lobby, greeting customers by name. He paused to watch a young woman in workout clothes discussing her growing chain of fitness centers with a loan officer. 6 months ago, she might have been directed to a different bank. Today, she was finalizing a multi-million-dollar expansion loan. At the customer service desk, a man in paint-covered clothes was opening his first business account. "I used to be nervous about coming to banks," he told the teller. "But a friend said this place was different." The teller smiled, remembering how many similar stories she'd heard lately. The branch manager caught her reflection in a window and saw someone she was finally proud to be. The person who had judged people by their clothes seemed like a stranger now. "Every mistake can be a turning point," she often said in training sessions, "if you're brave enough to learn from it." As afternoon approached, the bank's community room filled up again, this time for a workshop on international business expansion. The speaker was wearing jeans and a t-shirt, looking much like the tech entrepreneur had on that fateful day. But now, no one cared about his clothes. They were too busy learning from his success. The day was ending, but the impact of their changes would continue. The bank had become more than just a place for transactions. It was a symbol of how one moment of prejudice, handled with dignity and wisdom, could transform an entire industry. Success still walked through their doors every day, wearing whatever it wanted, and finally receiving the welcome it deserved. 1 year had passed since that memorable day at Metropolitan Trust. The bank was hosting its first annual Success Wears Many Faces Awards ceremony, celebrating entrepreneurs who had overcome barriers to achieve their dreams. The grand lobby was filled with people from all walks of life, their diverse attire a testament to how much had changed. The tech entrepreneur sat in the front row, wearing his signature casual style. He smiled, remembering how his simple visit to open a bank account had sparked a revolution in banking. Today, he wasn't here as a speaker or even as a board member. He was here to witness the fruits of that difficult day. The branch manager stepped up to the podium, looking confident but humble. "A year ago, I made a judgment that changed my life," she began. "I looked at someone's clothes instead of their character. That mistake taught all of us, that success doesn't have a dress code." In the audience, a construction worker who'd recently opened his 4th development project sat next to a retired CEO in an expensive suit. They were chatting like old friends, sharing business tips and laughing together. These scenes had become common at the bank, but they still brought smiles to everyone's faces. The young employee, now a nationally recognized speaker on banking inclusion, presented the first award. To the food truck owner who became a restaurant mogul, he announced, as a man in a simple chef's coat walked up to accept his award. "You showed us that dreams can start with a single recipe and grow into an empire." The regional director watched from the side, reading through the latest industry reports. Metropolitan Trust's approach had been copied by banks across the country. Their customer base had tripled, but more importantly, they'd created a model that proved doing the right thing was also good business. A local news crew captured the moment as a woman in medical scrubs received an award for her healthcare staffing company. "I remember being turned away from 3 banks because I came straight from my nursing shift," she shared. "This bank saw my vision, not my uniform." The tech entrepreneur's phone buzzed with messages from other business leaders wanting to implement similar programs in their industries. What had started in banking was spreading to real estate, insurance, and beyond. The message was clear: judge people by their character and potential, not their appearance. In the back of the room, new bank employees watched in amazement. During their training, they'd learned about the incident, but seeing its impact in person was different. Success really did wear many faces, and they were all welcome here. The branch manager announced the final award of the evening, a special recognition for the young employee who had stood up that day. "Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest acts of courage," she said, her voice full of emotion. "One person willing to say this isn't right can transform an entire industry." As the ceremony concluded, the tech entrepreneur walked through the lobby one last time. The premium services area where he'd been dismissed a year ago was now a symbol of inclusion. The ropes and barriers were long gone, replaced by open spaces where everyone was welcome. The evening ended with the unveiling of a new plaque in the lobby. It read, "Success has no uniform. Character has no dress code. Dreams have no barriers." Below these words was the date of that fateful day, now celebrated as the beginning of a new era in banking. Outside, the city lights twinkled as people left the ceremony, each carrying their own dreams and wearing whatever reflected their journey. The bank stood as a testament to how one moment of discrimination, handled with dignity and wisdom, could lead to lasting change. The tech entrepreneur took one final look at the building before leaving. What had started as a simple attempt to open a bank account had become something much bigger, a movement that reminded everyone that true success isn't about what you wear, but who you are and what you can achieve.